welcome to the Soundcheck Podcast, part of the Feedback Network. I'm Dennis Minter. Alongside me is Alice Haldane.
Hi, everyone.
And we are also joined by Ed Luddington over in the corner there, a fashion student from Sheffield Hallam University. What are we talking about today, Alice?
Thank you for joining us, Ed. So today we're going to talk about the relationship between fashion and music. They've long shared a symbiotic relationship, and we just want to delve into it, really, and see how bands and artists can identify themselves through fashion. So, yeah, Ed, would you like to tell us a bit about the bands you're in to start with?
So I'm currently in two bands outside of a society. The first band being I'm Being Serious, which is kind of like a psych rock outfit, a 5-piece band, 2 guitars, bass, drums, and then a singer. But we swap around a bit because there's a bit of overlap. And then King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard cover band called Gizzard Gizzard, which I'm in with my brother who plays bass, another guitarist, and a drummer.
Nice. Well, you're wearing one of their shirts today. I can't say that I know a lot about the Gizzard style as such. I know what their music sounds like. I think it would be good to start off this sort of episode talking about iconic music, fashion moments and the big ones throughout history. Do you have a particular favourite that you go, music peaked in fashion terms here?
I really, really like David Byrne of the Talking Heads. I feel like it can't be said other than his appearance in Stop Making Sense. Mm-hmm. I feel like his suit in that, the changes in what he wears, it's just so iconic, and it's definitely informed a lot of how I dress on stage. Mm-hmm. But that's one of my favourites. Others that come to mind, you've got David Bowie. I'm not as familiar with his work, but I've definitely in the past looked through collections of things that he's worn, and I know that he was very close with his designers, and I feel like although a designer definitely isn't necessary to have as an artist, if you do have one, having like quite a personal connection with them is really important, because you're acting in a way as their muse. But as I say, that sort of thing, you can do it all yourself, really. It's just making garments and things you might need to contact someone else for.
So what is it about both of those that you liked so much specifically, other than just sort of the relationship that they had with their clothes?
Bowie, I feel like he was incredibly expressive in his style, in his stage personas, and I feel like he at all points was being incredibly authentic to himself, which I think is really important in kind of like image on stage. You shouldn't be going for something that you're not. I feel you need to be dressing in a way that you like and appreciate, and is just a reflection of your inner self. And then with David Byrne, I just really like the large suit. I like how it plays with the silhouette. I like the kind of taking a similar garment and changing around and playing with it. I like how it plays into the choreography of his stage persona. They're the main two big things.
They say that, don't they? I don't know if you've seen the D Men's Workwear guy on Twitter. If you haven't, he's a great follow. He's always on about people's suits and comparing them to different things, and throughout like sort of men's fashion certainly, and maybe we'll touch on a bit of women's fashion later as well. What is it? You mentioned the silhouette there. How important is it to sort of have such an identifiable figure, and why is that important to a musician?
I think especially at their stage, but also when you're just starting out, it is important to set yourself out and to do it in like such an original kind of new way. And playing around with things like shape and silhouette and colour are definitely because they're like the building blocks of fashion, really. You have shape, colour, silhouette, pattern, proportions slightly different, but like being able to play around with those things and find something that you like that works for you, but also kind of stands out a bit, I think is definitely important. Yeah.
Can you describe your fashion to the readers? Like for your band in particular?
Yeah, it's really difficult with that because we, between both of them, we change it around a lot. So I'm being serious. We each gig try and follow like a organized style together. So we'll have like at our last gig there was an importance on wearing shorts. At most gigs we all try and wear sunglasses or some form of eyewear just to kind of bring a sense of like cohesion together on stage. But in our first gig we decided to go very formal as like a way of expressing like that we're celebrating that it's our first gig.
Nice.
But yeah, I would say we definitely try and focus on a style each gig as opposed to necessarily each having individual styles. At this stage,
Yeah,
I don't know where we're going to move.
replicate each other, come as one. Yeah, it's nice.
Well, you mentioned earlier about sort of having something that is authentic to you, and something that I think is really interesting is the correlation between genre and fashion style, like physical style. How important do you think it is that those match up? You think of the band Slaves, then formerly Slaves, they're now Soft Play, I believe. Really, punky band playing suits all the time, and that's their like thing. Do you think that sort of thing works, or do you think it's good to have the marriage of fashion and genre style?
I think that's a really good question, and I feel like although it is kind of, I guess, antithetical to do something like that, where you're like you're all wearing suits or something, but you are a very punk sounding band. Although that does seem kind of antithetical, I think
that's
that in a
point.
way it's still kind of doing that same thing. It's setting themselves out.
Because I maybe I'm wrong in this, but I don't think anyone would accuse them of trying to bring punk into the workplace. They're more bringing the workplace to punk and making the suit more punky rather than making the punk more uptight.
I think definitely in the relationship between clothes and music on stage especially and as a band, it's less how your dress informing your music and more your music informing how you dress.
Okay.
So yeah, I think definitely in cases like that, I mean, you can even find like I know Frank Zappa, very much his image and his style of music was sat kind of comfortably with a lot of psychedelic rock around that age. But if you'd listen to a lot of what he says, he was very kind of against like the kind of like a hippie kind of image and like that kind of lifestyle. So I don't necessarily feel like it always demands that you dress or act in a certain way, and I think it can be very fun to push those boundaries coming from either end of like ideology and image.
What's your view on more controversial outfits? So I know Lady Gaga had one. She wore a meat dress to the 2010 MTV
infamous meat dress.
Video Awards. What's your opinion on those bold outfits that are controversial to some?
I think it's very case to case, but I always respect someone pushing boundaries in that sort of way. I think there's definitely a case to be made about like sometimes there's something that's like initially quite controversial and it just kind of eventually gets done to death. And I feel like after we've seen something like that, we don't necessarily need to see it again. But I think doing it at least once or kind of making a statement about it in that sort of way is I think it's difficult to kind of think about because with musicians like Lady Gaga, she kind of has the means to not really replicate outfits in the future moving forwards. Whereas I know that a lot of people, especially on like a more local level, would probably struggle to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that. Obviously, you know, this is a podcast for, you know, aspiring musicians and people who want to make that next step. What should people with not a lot of means to do so, what should they be thinking about dressing and how they dress? Or should they be considering it at all? Is it something that you really think is going to bring them, you know, to that sort of next level? Is it going to make them stand out? Or is it sort of, you know, got to crack on with the music, really?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I've been thinking about a lot in preparation for today. I've been kind of contemplating the importance, especially on the level that I'm at, like how important is it the way that I dress compared to like if I just focused on the music. But I feel like once you've kind of got the music down, or you've got like a sound that like the band can identify with, I think it's then quite natural of a progression to start thinking about kind of like the band's appearance and how that's expressed through not only what you're wearing, but also by what like merch you might be wanting to bring out. And I think it's first and foremost important to wear something that you're comfortable wearing on stage, and then you think about something that's authentic, and then you know, or there's a different way of approach that I've thought about doing to it, where you could first come together as a band on a kind of an idea, and then from there, within your own individual means, find out how you could explore that more personally, and then add your own kind of swing to it, even from within the band. But I think they're probably the two main approaches, so either like as a band or individually. But I feel like there should, it's really difficult not to feel a pressure to kind of, I definitely feel it myself of like, oh, but I'm repeating an outfit, I'm doing whatever. When in actual fact, no one's going to remember if you have, and if they are going to remember that, they're more likely to remember you being you. They're more likely to remember that outfit, to remember that image, to remember that band. So I think trying even just to form like an iconic look, you shouldn't be afraid to do anything really, to repeat outfits.
Stay true to yourself,
yeah,
really.
That's incredibly important.
It's something that I wanted to talk about in terms of like being really bold and out there. I mean, even getting in front of all this podcast kit, there's a slight inclination to start showing off and start being a bit different to as you would if, you know, if we were just down the pub having a chat where, you know, the cameras are off and everybody's just having a nice one. How do you think that pressure sort of translates onto people, especially at the lower end, where it's like, oh, I'm not sure I'm doing the right thing? And what do you think, you know, I mean, have you ever had experiences where you've been like, I'm not sure what I'm doing here? And how have you dealt with them?
Yeah, I've definitely had that feeling. I'm quite big into like, especially within, I'm part of the Music Players Society, and we often do gigs there. And the issue with trying to kind of like have a cohesive image around a band like that is there's so many members and players that you then start to feel like personally standing out might be a better way of moving. So I've worn mainly suits probably for those gigs since first year. And I'll say initially it was incredibly daunting to deliberately put myself in a markedly different style to most other people, and to kind of dress in a very different way. And I do always feel like it's something that you build up in your head a lot more than you actually than anything will ever happen for it. If anything, I find you often can get quite a lot of praise for just putting yourself out there a bit differently.
Well, how about that? Because I think definitely the opposite could happen as well. You know, imagine if, you know, one of us two had showed up in a full suit, like, right, we're going to do this really seriously. We're going to be, you know, the rock stars of the podcasting world today.
How would it make you feel?
First of all, how do you think it makes the audience feel? But then second of all, has it ever in your personal experience invited criticism and people gone, come on, mate, it's not that big?
I'll say there definitely have been occasions like that, and it's always kind of difficult to manage criticism about like your own very personal style.
Yeah.
I find that's like it's just a tough thing to hear.
In any walk of life, let alone
100%.
like
An important part is to, like, it's going to sound cliched, but to really not let it get you down and to just acknowledge that if that criticism, unless it's kind of very deliberate and structured, a lot of the times you'll find it's someone just being a bit jealous as to...
100%.
At what point do you maybe start, obviously, like, going back to Lady Gaga, the amount of not that she would ever care, I imagine, but the amount of
Her
criticism
outfit's
she
always
got
crazy.
from that meat suit and all the bad comments she got from that. At what point do you think, as a musician, you sort of have to turn around and go, yeah, probably not going to pull that one out again?
That's quite a difficult question.
Yeah, I know it's...
I feel like when it becomes harmful.
Yeah,
I guess.
I
like,
feel
when it
there are
becomes
definitely
harmful.
clear lines that you can
Yeah.
and I say that, and I feel like it's maybe a bit more different between certain people, but I feel like there are generally agreed upon kind of taboos that aren't breached in kind of the way that we dress or act, and I feel like you definitely do need to kind of think about how appropriate something is for stage wear.
Sure.
So like, it's something that we like in fashion have to consider too. It's like you need to do, if you're making patterns, especially if they're based on like art that might have been inspired by a different culture to yours, you have to handle it incredibly sensitively. And I don't think that should be lost in kind of like looking at stage wear, because the issue between kind of like dressing for stage and dressing generally is it's almost like a costume.
Yeah, but there's always going to be some truth behind the costume.
Oh
right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely. It's just a more kind of elevated, I guess, version of like image of yourself. And I think what you then need to think about is this the image I want to be presenting?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, definitely kind of keeping considerate to how your clothes will keep you perceived. So, like, definitely, like, staying away from, or not necessarily staying away from, but treating certain more sensitive things more sensitively and more appropriately. I can't place my hand on any particular images other than the meat dress. I think that is a pretty good
it's a controversial.
pretty good example, because it was definitely very controversial, and there is something to be said about like the waste that it must have created.
Well, this is the thing. On one hand, I know, and I guess this sort of comes down to what you're saying here, where it's about, you know, what you mean versus what public perception is going to be. I think if I remember correctly, and I might be wrong, there was some sentiment of the internet who said, oh, maybe she's doing it for like awareness of all of this sort of stuff. And do you think you have to be careful with that sort of awareness versus, come on, you're just doing this now, nobody needed that?
I do think that, there have been definitely a lot of cases where it's like, although you might be kind of doing something for awareness of an issue, you need to think about if you're maybe kind of creating more of an issue yourself. And like, I know, like with Kanye is probably quite an extreme example, but he's definitely a very prominent figure in the music industry.
You can't ignore him.
And although like just for the last year and a bit, people have been like, but what if he's potentially kind of acting as some form of, you know, bad example?
Yes.
It's like he's still doing the bad thing. It's not a good enough defense.
Yeah, well, going back to kind of your own style quickly, I know you mentioned suits. How do you feel when you put those suits on? Do you feel like you're going into a different character, or would you say you still feel yourself? Does it help with that stage presence at all?
I suppose kind of yes and no. As I say, it's like I guess it kind of more elevates how I am
how you perform
as a person, like because I often just wear like what I'll wear on stage as kind of everyday clothes.
Yeah.
But so yeah, there's definitely a feeling of like, well, this is just me, this is just what I wear. But when I do get into the kind of more kind of considered outfits, there is definitely a feeling of like of readiness, I guess, and like ritualism into kind of getting onto stage.
Yeah. Could you tell me a bit about like your experience with designing the clothes for your band and for yourself?
Yeah, sure.
What's that all about?
I have some stuff here as well.
Lovely.
But
Yeah, what's that?
These are some like a lino cut
Ooh, they're sick.
that I did for.
Oh my gosh. Is it alright if I have
sure.
a look? Yeah.
Can you describe them to people who aren't watching the video at the moment?
So they are lino block prints that I've recently produced as a part of a module on printmaking, but I also did it partially for like a personal project.
Yeah.
Because I was feeling like I needed some way of like adding a bit more personality even into like what I wear on stage and what I wear in my everyday. So
These are sick.
I then designed and made a like a gilet with them on.
That's
so
incredible.
These are the prints on the gilet. You did the
So again, for those who aren't watching the video, he's holding up a lovely beige gilet with some nice red print on all four of the front
pockets.
pockets.
Like a utility jacket style. That's really cool.
There's a zip that crops it down as well.
Would you all wear that? Like keeping that kind of that similar style throughout your band?
Not all of us, no, but I'm definitely working on like making more garments that have kind of like linking symbolism for my band to wear together. But that's potentially going to come a bit down the line just for how long it'll take.
Well, you've mentioned the importance of sort of having a theme, certainly in a multi-person band, and how that can sort of bring out the good parts of togetherness. I want to go in sort of the opposite direction and talk about a little bit what we were talking about earlier. What makes a bad outfit? What would you not wear other than being culturally insensitive in areas? Is there anything that you really wouldn't go for? Because I feel like maybe with music, it's sort of like, even if it's poorly put together, you mentioned, like colour and size and all that sort of stuff. I think you can put together something that would be like theoretically bad, but it's like, oh, he's a rock star, it's cool.
Yeah, I think that is such a tough question because
very subjective.
I really like it though, and it's going to be hard to kind of fight against my own biases that I know I definitely have with certain clothes. And the thing is, even if I do have those biases, it's all personal opinion, and it's like that I think most clothes look fine on other people. It's just there are some things I wouldn't wear myself, but I feel like it generally comes down to like the level of consideration, and like if it's very highly thought out, it will probably end up looking quite nice together. But then it can also wrap around the other way to when you have a band that really doesn't kind of care about their appearance and all they're about is the music. I feel like it kind of more removes it from the question of like that isn't even something you'd think about with the band. If they are expressly against it. But I don't know. I feel like something to me, like I've seen some bands just go up in like what I'd refer to as like stage black clothing for like theatre productions, and it's just, I feel like there's a better way of going about that. I don't know.
Yeah, like
even just wearing your own clothes, maybe, or just
or just like adding a layer in,
Yeah,
like a jacket
Well,
or something.
you mentioned the silhouette as well.
yeah.
I think I imagine the way that I've imagined what you've just said is, quite a tight black t-shirt,
black
maybe
black
joggers,
t-shirt,
maybe
black
jeans,
trousers,
and nothing more.
Because especially on stage, I feel like it's not very like. It's kind of then harder to see the difference in colour and stuff if you're in a dark venue or something. It all gets a bit lost.
This is a really interesting point and sort of the kind of the crux of what we're getting to. If people are getting lost on stage, are they doing their jobs as musicians, really?
I think still yes, but I just feel like you're not reaching a full potential.
Yeah,
that might be their vibe, though. You never know. They might want to be invisible.
Yeah, maybe.
Again,
maybe.
I feel like if it's what you're going for,
You can justify everything.
yeah. I feel like it's but then you've had the consideration to go and do that. I just feel like it should be something that's discussed more between bands of like I've definitely been in bands and been around that where it's like, oh, that didn't even enter our heads how we would go up onto stage to look together. And I'm just I feel like it just needs to be a discussion that's had more. I think when it comes down to it, as well as just kind of like going for just very, I used like the stage black as an example, but like so either just going for something that's, I would say, kind of very, that was a very specific example. Sorry, I'm waffling, I realise.
No, please.
It's either that or like a kind of looking uncoordinated as a group, like where it looks like it's not really fitting together is another big one. And again, that can be played off, but it needs to be done in an authentic manner.
It should be considered as well.
There's I believe, a Brighton-based band called Flovers, who for the longest time, and you mentioned sort of someone standing out, and maybe if it's the front man or whatever, or the lead singer, and they had 4 quite regularly dressed guys, maybe a bit indie, maybe a bit of oversized stuff now and then their drummer was a mohawked, shirtless guy who just stared down the camera of almost every shot they ever took, and I remember thinking then, oh my god, this is really off-putting. And it's only now that you've sort of mentioned sort of that standing out and not being as coordinated, I fully understand that he might want to go, yeah, I'm a drummer, like all of this sort of stuff, and really be up for it. But I mean, how fine of a line is it between going, oh, I'm just doing my own thing, and then being, oh, you don't really fit in here?
It's an incredibly fine line. It's so hard to pin down, and even just you describing it, I was incredibly on the fence as to whether I liked it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it's just something that oftentimes, like that look of uncoordination or having someone stand out more, oftentimes more than not, it kind of ends up with the whole band looking a bit more sloppy than it does kind of stand out. But I mean, clearly they stood out in your mind. But,
it worked.
But then again, I remember them because I like their music. I think that they are a good band, and we've spoken about bands a lot. I wonder what you think of sort of solo musicians when you're on your own. How you are the band. You're a one person band. How far is it then on you to sort of sort yourself out? You mentioned David Bowie earlier and sort of like his great relationship that he had with his designers. How important is it as a solo artist to be like, right, I'm going to make sure that people know what I'm about with my dress sense?
I think it can go both ways majorly. There's like a relatively small, like a synth musician from back where I'm from in Lincoln, and he's just got this it's a really insane appearance on his own that really works to how he plays music. It's all like a DIY costume basically, and he wears a mask. But he also plays all these synths and instruments that he's made himself.
Yeah.
And I feel like it really adds to it. Whereas I've also seen like more solo artists, it seems quite I feel like it's at that point kind of most important to be like true to like who you are. I mean, it all depends on the type of music you're making, I guess.
Yeah.
If it's like classic like songwriting, like just solo artist, you know, person with a guitar style music, then I feel like you could definitely much more get away with going with your own kind of casual clothing
Ed Sheeran
or pretty much, yeah. But I feel like the more kind of personality you have in your music and just kind of, I feel like it's then hard to, you know, not involve more and more of that into how you kind of dress, how it's not just how you dress, it's again how your merch comes out, how your kind of appearance on stage is, what you do, kind of what instruments you play. And I feel like it all informs all of this. Like there's makeup is quite a big part of appearance.
100%. Like Amy Winehouse, her outfits were relatively simple, but her eyeliner, her iconic beehive, that was a massive part of her look. It wasn't necessarily her outfits at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. And you can find limiting factors. Like I've always been interested in how I could involve makeup in my live performance, but because I play harmonica, I can't really do it.
No, you can always do it.
Well, let's talk about this. Obviously, we've spoken, and I've been guilty of it as well, of sort of assuming that we're talking about a male band here. I've said he a lot of the time when I mean they.
The women.
Let's talk about the women in, you know, music. How difficult do you think it is? I feel certainly there's a perception that there is higher standards on them and a lot more sort of criticism, and they maybe come under a much harsher eye. How different is it? Do you know? I'm going to preface this next part by saying my knowledge of women's wear compared to like my knowledge of men's wear is pretty weak.
Yeah. Naturally there is. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's something that I'm looking to get more into, but it's up until now I've kind of left it to the wayside, unfortunately. I still do design a lot. It's more just in the making. I don't really actually make a lot of women's clothes, but I think it's inherently a lot more difficult. It's especially looking, not like, as you said, like trying to make it as a female artist, the pressure from what I've heard again is like, it seems to be a lot kind of, there's a lot more pressure to kind of act and to in a certain way or to perform in a certain way. I feel like there's a lot more comparison that happens for female artists, and I feel like that's definitely something you find in like dressing as well. Even more so. It's because to my knowledge, with just everyday life dressing, hair and makeup is something that I feel men, I mean hair I guess, but makeup a lot less rare. So having just like 2 extra levels of things that you have to think about, trying to pull off the kind of I guess more I'm trying to think of the word for it. More of kind of like a, I can't think of of a word for it. But
what are you
kind
trying
of
to
like
say? Describe around it. Maybe we'll be able to help.
I don't know. Just kind of like a bit more of a dishevelled appearance. I feel like.
Is there an expectation on women to be cleaner?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there is. I feel like and it's. I mean, it's absolutely unfair. It's the amount of effort that's required for, I would say, what is the bottom least acceptable appearance for a man is like the effort needed for that is far below what we would kind of expect as a society for a woman to kind of present themselves as. And so that definitely then bleeds into like stage performances, and it has been really nice seeing bands and artists like it's not necessarily what I was meaning, but kind of going for like more of a grungy aesthetic. What comes to mind is like Amyl and the Sniffers.
Yeah.
They really went for that. They've got
going for something that wasn't traditionally feminine and getting success from it.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to like Marlena Dietrich and her wearing like suits and stuff, even though that doesn't sound that crazy to us, it was like all the way back in the 50s, I believe.
Even the other way, and you look at Prince, for example, and the amount of press that he got over his sort of quest for androgyny, and I mean, Chris Rock famously sort of asked him, like, was it an act? Was it to sell stuff, or was it to sort of find your sexual identity that you went down this route? And he went, I don't know. I did it because it was me. And I think, you can think of Prince in your mind right now. For me, purple blazer, the white little frilly collar, I think everyone's got the same idea because that style was so iconic regardless of what the standards were on him. And I just want to sort of bring it full circle back to one of the questions that we asked at the beginning about how important it is to have that iconic look. Is that the advice that you'd give to sort of aspiring artists to, as well as be true to yourself, try and find something that is unmistakably you?
Yeah. I would say it definitely, at the end of the day, it comes down to like the sound first. You need to find your sound. It's such an like a buzzword. I mean, it's music. Sound sounds like it would obviously, but like specifically is like, there's something unmistakably sounds like you in a piece of music throughout all of your repertoire of songs and whatever. That's you. I feel like the next kind of evolution of that is your clothes. Mm-hmm. So that's what, your appearance, how you're perceived. I think it all comes down to what you dress, kind of how you make your face and hair look. Yeah, I definitely think that is important. Again, I'd say the balance probably rests more on the side of being authentic to yourself, and I briefly mentioned comfort, but I think it's pretty paramount, and it's kind of ignored a lot in discussion of especially like figures. It's like the amount of comfort sacrificed, especially for when you're on stage for God knows how long. I mean, I've done 30-minute gigs in a suit, and I've been dripping with sweat afterwards, absolutely out of breath. And comfort is definitely something to think about in that you don't want to push yourself kind of too hard, but I'd definitely say find something that works for you, then try and kind of push it, make it iconic. I think there's something to be said for that too. Like Weezer, an incredibly kind of nerdy band, embraced that. Yeah. And they did so even with their image of like just kind of sticking to it, but they were being authentic to themselves while doing that and creating like an iconic image, like.
And even across like social media, for example, as well.
Yeah,
like
that's super important.
That is super important to come through.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a good part of that's trying to get a good photographer. Yeah. I feel. Sort of if a tree falls in a woods and no one remembers it, if you had a really cool gig but you didn't have a photographer there, did it happen,
So what would your advice be to sort of aspiring musicians, other than sort of, try and be authentic?
I feel like I've actually had like a pretty similar conversation with a lot of like new small musicians in Sheffield on like we'll talk about like how we dress and we'll compare how we dress. And people might say, Ed, you seem a bit more outgoing with your outfits, stuff like that. I don't think I could do that. And the truth is, I couldn't either too about 4 or 5 years ago. I just had to push myself to start dressing, to start exploring new ways. And I definitely found things that I didn't like. I've definitely encountered clothes that I don't like, and I've worn them and stuff, and then I've not gotten on with them, and then you just find you either give them away, charity shops, anything like that. It's definitely important to make sure you're not wasting clothes or anything. Yeah. It's a terrible industry for waste, but I'll definitely say just it's obviously cliched to say it's all about confidence, but you're the only person that can start changing it, that can start changing how you dress. You should be the only person doing that. Mm-hmm. If you're completely happy with how you dress or you disagree with me, then it's luckily all based on opinion. But I'd definitely be like, if there is something that you've seen online that you're like, oh, I don't know if it's a bit me, if it's a bit loud, if it's a bit whatever, go for it. Just get it, wear it, find out. It might not work for you. It might, but you'll never know until you try. And I'd say that's probably my biggest bit, because I used to wear incredibly straight, narrow suits in my first year of sixth form. They didn't suit me at all. I looked terrible in them, but pushing to wear something just a bit different, I found a new style that really kind of worked for me, that I feel a lot more comfortable and happy with. And I'd have never have known if I just continued wearing what I was before. But so don't be afraid to try new things, I would say.
Out of interest, just because you mentioned your own personal opinion and how subjective fashion can be, is there only one piece of clothing you'd like to see musicians try out a little bit more? Or something maybe you encountered that you didn't like, that you'd like to see sort of styled? Maybe a nice polka dot cravat.
I really do like cravats. I feel like I've said it a bit. I don't know. I feel like we could see the ruff come back. Yeah. From I think it's almost quite Prince even, because of course he had the layered cravat. I'd like to see that come back. But I don't think I could say anything that there is that I dislike. Mm-hmm. I mean, any clothes that I dislike, I just know I don't like them on me. I think there are definitely cases to be made and examples for clothes that work on other people. I think if anything, like the very European and Italian like styles of tailoring, I think they're quite played out. We've had skin tight suits for the last 10 or so years, but luckily we are seeing quite a bit of change in that. I know like there's a lot of designers like absolutely drawing a blank on them presently.
But how much of it is cyclical?
It is very cyclical.
Yeah, you mentioned obviously it going tight, and then we're going back the other way now.
Because like loose suits is very 50s kind of 50s look, and then just a couple years before that, it was closer to the skin. I do think it is all very cyclical, but I think the more that it progresses and as time goes on, we do kind of find that there are more and more niches, more and more people pushing boundaries, and as technology evolves, so does fashion. We can do so much more now than we could even 5 or 10 years ago, just because of how our understanding has changed.
Yeah, well, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Ed.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was lovely to have you on. Thank you for taking your time to come on.
No, absolutely. So if you get nothing else from this podcast, it is that you should wear what the hell you want. Confidence doesn't have to be loud, doesn't have to be out there, doesn't have to be really whatever, just has to be you. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed. You've been listening to the Soundcheck Podcast, part of the Feedback Network. I've been Dennis Minter, Alice Haldane alongside me, and Ed Luddington over there. What a man. Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.